Increasingly over the last 15, 20 years, you're finding that conservation organisations are recognising that development is going to happen and that demand for things like timber is not going to go away. And so either you're engaging with the sector in terms of the impacts that it might have, or you're letting it happen and you're not influencing at all. And so over the last 10, 15 years, conservation organisations have recognised that and started to engage with the sector and looking at ways that they can improve management and looking at ways that they can influence. Now, whether that's through things like voluntary programmes like forestry certification, or whether that's influencing things at a higher policy level, so for example trying to influence national laws, or looking at the way that agencies like the EU or consumer countries might buy goods or demand that goods meet a certain standard, for example the EU timber regulations, and looking at the different ways that you can influence change within the sector. You're looking at certain sectors where obviously demand for natural resources isn't going to go down. However, I think that the balance between development and conservation is not mutually exclusive. You can engage, as we have been doing with the forestry sector, but also the mining sector and other sectors, to implement best practices that is consistent with conservation goals. If you're talking about World Heritage Sites, protected areas, I'd probably have a different take there, but then they don't actually cover that large an area. And you're talking about between 10 to 14% of the land, for example, in Central Africa. And I would hope that we can still meet a lot of the world's resource needs without necessarily impacting on those. I think the main thing from that report is that it really does highlight that the perhaps perception that development and conservation are mutually exclusive and the two things cannot be reconciled isn't actually the case. And that not only do we need to recognise that, we need to actually work together, look at the partnerships between the industry sector, NGOs, scientists, governments, to actually reconcile those two goals. And I think that that's the main take-home message from the book. And I think it's to get that to a wider audience, I think it's very important. I would like to see this book engender change in the way that extractive industries practice their operations so that they actually look at wildlife conservation, biodiversity conservation as their business, basically, and that it's something that's not outside of their remit. In fact, it should be something that's at the core of how they operate. A world that doesn't have great apes in it would be a much poorer place. However, great apes as a species, the evidence is clear, are an essential component of making sure that the forest ecosystem is healthy. They spread seed, all sorts of different roles that are essential to maintaining that system. And without them, that system will change in ways that we can't necessarily predict. And the healthy tropical forest provides all sorts of ecosystem services that local people, and even at a global scale, that we rely on. And apes are an essential part of making sure that those continue.